Thank you, Pastor Steve. Good morning, and I want to start off with a question for you. Have you ever picked on someone about a mistake they made, only to turn around and find yourself making that same mistake? Oh yeah, right. It's happened. It certainly has happened to me, and I don't know if you recall, but when I preached in the end of December of last year, which, believe it or not, we're coming up on the third month of this year. That's hard to believe. But when I preached last time, I think I mentioned something about how all these Michiganders I'm seeing that are getting stuck and going off the road. And here's this good old boy from North Carolina. You got to get the "ah" in there, all right? It's not Bible, it's Bible. It's North Carolina. And I hadn't gotten stuck yet. Carrie and I were looking to do some cross-country skiing, and so we're looking around and trying to figure out where to go. And someone, I can't remember who, someone said, "Oh, you should check out Pentwater Pathways. There's great cross-country skiing there." Well, if you know anything about that neck of the woods, it's not the best place to take a Volkswagen Beetle. And so we went out there to do some cross-country skiing, and I'm having fun with it. And we made it. We made it to the parking lot. But on the way in to the parking lot, Carrie said, "Hey, look at this icy spot here. I think we need to avoid it when we go to leave." Well, you know, she even reminded me of that on the way back, but I hop in the car and I'm ready to go, and I back up straight over that icy spot, and as soon as the rear wheels back over that icy spot, it goes crash into the water, and I open my door, and the water is lapping at the frame of the car, and I can hear the muffler under the water going gloop, gloop, gloop. I needed a snorkel on the Bug. That would be kind of cool, actually. Carrie, can I put a snorkel on your Bug? I think it would be cool. Anyways, and so I hear the gloom, gloom, and Carrie's freaking out a little bit. "My Bug, my Beetle!" And so we're trying to figure out what to do. And of course, I have to try to get it out on my own first. So we're pushing it and trying to get it turned around and see if we can get some of the tires on some good traction. And no luck. So what do? Well, we think about who to call, and so I just thought to myself, who's someone that would probably enjoy a good rescue? So I called Pastor Dave. And Pastor Dave came out with his truck, hooked a rope up to us, and with one good little tug, and we were out of there. But Pastor Dave, where are you at? It was a deep hole, was it not? Guys, I was really stuck, okay? And I got to say, thank you, Pastor Dave. I think this year you're my number one hero. So give it up for Pastor Dave, everyone. Thank you for coming and rescuing us. As a kid, did you ever have any weird heroes? Like people that, looking back, like, why was this person a hero in my life? I had some weird ones, and you guys are probably going to think they're especially weird because growing up in Brazil, I watched a show called Sítio do Pica-Pau Amarelo. I just said that so you could hear some Portuguese. And it was all about folkloric characters of Brazilian folklore, and they're in this show. And there's this one guy, and I'm going to describe him to you, and you're going to be like, what in the world? He only had one leg, and he traveled around in a little wind daredevil, what do you call them? Like, not like a full tornado, like a wind, like kind of like a little tornado, right? So that's how he traveled. And he wore all red and I guess kind of like a long stocking cap thing that was red on his head. And he was considered a scoundrel. He was always playing pranks on people. And he was definitely one of our heroes as a kid. Then there was this guy called Ronaldinho Gaúcho. He's a soccer player, very famous if you watch soccer. And the reason he was our hero was because during the Brazilian national anthem in the 2010 World Cup, while everyone's singing the national anthem and serious and hand over their hearts, Ronaldinho Gaúcho, when it pans the camera to him, he has his tongue in his nose. And so that moment lived in our minds forever, and he became our number one soccer hero because, and we tried so hard to get our tongue in our nose. One of my brothers succeeded and was pretty good at it. I never got that talent personally. As kids, oftentimes we have heroes, people that we look up to with so much respect. But you know what? As we become adults, as we grow up, we may not name our heroes. We may not go around talking about this person's our hero. But I think we all have people of influence in our life. people who have mentored us through their conversations or maybe their content online, people who have encouraged us when we were down, inspired us, maybe through their music, taught us lessons that have shaped us for the better. I'm thinking parents, mentors, spouses, of course, famous people as well who we watch online they have an impact on our life. But today's message is to question, how far does your inspiration from these heroes go? Because if we're not careful, we can take someone who has had a positive influence in our life and give them too much influence. The kind of influence that should only belong to Jesus, and so a person goes from a source of inspiration to a source of idolatry. So look in your notes. First thing, the main thing, hero worship happens when we give people the influence over our life that only belongs to Jesus. Hero worship happens when we give people the influence over our life that only belongs to Jesus. And I think it can happen in ways we don't expect. So open up your Bibles to the book of John. Our primary passage, as you see, is John chapter 9 in the notes. However, I want you to turn to John chapter 6 first, because we got to get a little background. So John chapter 6, we are stepping into a dispute that is happening over really from John 3 all the way to John 9, and it shows up all across the New Testament. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's going to sound like a trick question. It's not a trick question. It's an obvious question, but it sounds like a trick question. Here's the question. Who gave manna to the people of Israel when they were wandering in the desert? God, thank you. Should be obvious, right? Like, God. Well, who else could it be? Let's find out. John chapter 6, we're going to read verse 32. Verse 32 of John chapter 6. Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven." Well, I would think that if you asked the Jews, was it God or Moses, they would say God. But in this passage, they're acting almost as if Moses had given them this bread. And if you pay attention as you read the Gospels and read the dialogue that happens between Jesus and the Pharisees and Jesus and the people about Moses in the Old Testament, there's an almost weirdly reverent tone and language about Moses. And it's not just in the New Testament, because we have writings outside of the New Testament from right before Jesus' time and right after Jesus' time that give us an insight into what the people, the rabbis of the day were thinking. And they're weird about Moses. There's a book called The Assumption of Moses, where it's like secret prophecies that supposedly Moses gave to Joshua, and some people use as an excuse to like make up all these extra rules that Moses would have intended us to do all along. And then there's this play, it's written like a play, called The Life of Moses by Philo. And Moses is presented as a perfect human. And check this out. He even holds 4 offices: the office of king, lawgiver, high priest, and prophet. Now, if you think about the story of the Bible and Jesus, this should make your ears kind of perk up. Like, what? Moses didn't hold any of these titles. Maybe lawgiver, but even then he was just relaying God's laws. He certainly wasn't a king. His brother was a high priest. Sure, you can call him a prophet, but don't forget that he was so nervous about being a speaker, he insisted and just persisted with God for Aaron to be a speaker on his behalf. So we can talk all big about Moses, but when we read his story, there are plenty of flaws that come forward. Certainly these titles would not apply to him. But then also what's interesting is that Jesus claims each of these titles for himself, doesn't he? To be king, to be high priest, to be prophet, and lawgiver. Now turn to John 9, just a couple pages over. Jesus has already healed someone on the Sabbath and already caused a whole controversy about that. And he's about to do it again. outside of the extra laws that the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, are coming up with, Moses did in fact give laws about creating a day of rest called the Sabbath, the Shabbat, a Saturday every week. And there was all these things they were supposed to do. So there were certainly rules and regulations about how to honor the Jewish Sabbath. But beyond that, the religious leaders of the day, called the Pharisees, they added all kinds of stuff. And so let's read verse 6 and 7 of John chapter 9. After saying this, Jesus spit on the ground, made some mud with a saliva, ew, and put it on the man's eyes, extra ew. Verse 7, go, he told them, wash in the pool. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now, what's interesting about this, Jesus could have just said, hey, be healed. Hey, see. But he does some very interesting things. And these are interesting because, once again, we have all these traditions of the day that we can read about. And in them, we can read some of the extra rules that people came up with to supposedly honor the Sabbath. Not just anybody that came up with them, right? The religious leaders. For example, there was a law specifically prohibiting the use of spittle on the Sabbath for medicinal purposes. I'm not kidding. It is, yeah, it's in the Talmud. And the reason is that some people thought a person who had fasted long enough that their spittle had healing properties. So, I'm thinking as a side gig, Carrie, it's a whole lot easier than giving plasma. Then he makes clay, and that one's not called out specifically as far as I know, but I could see maybe the Pharisees, he made clay, like bricks of clay or whatever. He made clay with his spit. That's against their expectations for Sabbath. And then he heals a person, which you were not supposed to seek or give healing unless someone's life was in danger. So he does that too. He has challenged their notion of what it means to honor the Sabbath. And of course, the Pharisees catch wind of this, and they're not happy. And the blind man goes off, he washes in the pool, and he's healed, and he's telling people about it. And so the Pharisees call him in for questioning. They don't like what he has to say, so they call in his parents. They don't like what they have to say, so they call in the formerly blind man a second time. And that's where we pick up in verse 24 of John chapter 9, verse 24. A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. Pause right there. Can we just call out like the manipulation that's happening? They bring in this guy. I imagine that he's surrounded by these important religious people, and they're like, don't dishonor God. Tell the truth. You don't want to disappoint God, right? Tell us the truth. Or in other words, the truth they want to hear. And verse 25, let's read his reply. He replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Verse 26, then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? Verse 27, he answered, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Verse 28, then they hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, right out in the open. We've been reading about it all throughout the past couple chapters. We saw a little bit of it in John chapter 6, but here it is, a case of hero worship in the book of John. And what's so interesting about this is, hey, it's a hero. It's actually a hero of faith. It's someone we should look at and learn from their life as he followed God. And Moses did so many incredible things by the power of God. But they had taken someone who could be a true source of inspiration and taken it to a point of idolatry. And if we aren't careful, we can take someone who has done something good for us, who has provided something valuable for us. It doesn't have to be someone we know personally. It can be someone we know through the internet or a book, right? But they've done something for us that's helped us. And we take that influence that they have over our life and we start applying it more to other things they say, to too much that they say, and pretty soon they've become a person who has more influence in us and in our lives than God himself. So let's talk about how to know when a hero has become an idol. Let's look at number 1, letter A in your notes. 1A, rely on them for continual emotional stability. Now, I'm certainly thankful for people I've been able to lean on in times of trouble, but there's a difference between leaning on and relying on, isn't there? Have you ever said, this person is my rock? I wouldn't be anything without this person. I couldn't make it in life without this person. Because if you've said that, I want you to reflect. Are you approaching a kind of respect and attention that you're giving to someone that should be only reserved for God? Is there a dependency on this person that has started to take the place of a dependency that should be on God? Letter B in your notes. How do we know if a hero has become an idol? When we respond to someone's questioning of your hero as a personal insult. The Pharisees did this one, right? The Pharisees did this one. The formerly blind man, he questioned them. He put some feedback, some pushback, and they hurl insults at them. And it actually gets worse. Read on in verse 29, back in John chapter 9, verse 29. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. The man answered, now that is remarkable. I feel like there's got to be a little bit of sass going on here, right? That is remarkable, he says. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. Verse 34, to this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. Whether or not he had some sass or was snarky, either way, we have a man who was blind all his life, and in the time of the day, that probably meant he was begging on the streets. He couldn't work. Maybe he had support from his family. We certainly read about his parents here, so maybe he wasn't, but he certainly was not a powerful, respected person. People saw his blindness as a sign of his sinfulness. That's why they call him a man steeped in sin at birth. Jesus, of course, goes against this, and that's actually part of why this passage is here, because the disciples asked him whose sin led to this man's blindness, and Jesus answers that it's nobody's sin, but he is blind so that the power of God could be shown. And we have this blind person who these religious leaders are around, and they get their buttons pushed because someone asks a question. Does that ever happen to you? Do you go into battle mode if your heroes get a little bit of pushback from someone? Do you feel personally attacked? I didn't know this, but there's a word called standing. Didn't know this, but on social media, if you're like aggressively defending someone in the comments, and you see like someone who's like, anytime there's a post about a political issue or a musical person, and that person's always in the comments defending them and typing things up, apparently that's called standing. And if you didn't know that, I didn't know that, but you might have done it. Maybe not on social media, but what happens if someone questions the moral character of someone famous you admire, of a politician or a singer? What happens if someone questions how Charlie Kirk handled some of his debates, or the teachings of a leadership of a pastor you admire, or the actions of a family member? What happens when someone asks a question? Do you get defensive? Do you get your buttons pushed? Because if you do, then maybe this person has become an idol in your life. Letter C, blind to their faults and sin. 1C, blind to their faults and sin. All right, we're going to have some fun with this one. We're going to try to have some fun with this one. I asked Pastor Steve if I could do this, and he gave a very good lead pastor answer. He said, ask Pastor Dave. You ready back there, sound guys? Oh, whoa. All right, here we go. Yeah, there it is. All right, Back to Black, right? Good song. All right, how about this one? That one's definitely not Christian. You might be able to make a debate on whether this one is. See if I remember it. Don't Stop Believing, right? Like, you could make it Don't Stop Believing about Jesus. You could make that one spiritual. I don't know. All right, this last one. I've never played a song by this artist before. I got to even play it back. I listened to it last night. All right, here we go. This is for like half the people in the room, and the other half of the people in the room are not going to be a fan of this one at all. Here we go. All right, there's some Swifties in the room. I know that, right? Okay. Now, what do these three songs have in common? Well, they're all secular songs. I'll say that at least the first two are fun. I'm not going to say that the third one's fun, okay? I can't do that. It's fun for half the people in the room. And if we're honest, it's easy to say this about the first band. They're a full-out rock band. They're AC/DC. If we're honest, it's easy to be honest and say, oh, they're not living for Jesus. I don't know a lot about the Journey band, but I imagine they were not living for Jesus. But what I've noticed for some people I've talked to, when we start talking about the third one, about Taylor Swift, and we start asking some questions about whether she lives for Jesus and about whether some of her songs should be questioned, all of a sudden some people get really defensive, don't they? I'm trying not to look at any lady right now. I'm not looking at any lady, okay? I am going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story about someone that is in my circle of influence and family-wise. We always have lots of different Christmas get-togethers between extended family and our actual family, right? And so during one Christmas celebration, we're opening some gifts, and it was like a smaller gift opening. It was just a couple people. We each had one gift. And one of the ladies in this group, she's a 26-year-old. She's not like a teenager or anything. She gets a vinyl and opens it up. It's a Taylor Swift vinyl of her most recent album. And I don't know a lot about Taylor Swift. I really don't. Like, I had to listen to a song last night and be like, all right, what's a song that everyone's going to know? But I'm looking at this album. We're sitting at a table, and the cover, she's not wearing a lot of clothes. And then you open it up, and this person's opening it up. There's even less clothes. And then she pulls the sleeve out that holds the vinyl, and there's basically no clothes, okay? There's not a lot at all covering this lady. And then you read some of the song titles on the album, and Guilty as Sin, and some of the different ones, and I'm just looking at it, and I have questions, right? I have questions, but I know in my mind, I'm like, this is not the time to ask these questions, so I'm being quiet. Until she brought this up, okay? Until the person who had received this vinyl, she said, I just don't know why people hate on Taylor Swift and why they don't see her for who she is. And I'm like, okay, that's my invite, right? And so I said, well, I think the reason I get bothered about Taylor Swift is when people pretend like she's this role model for everyone. And so this lady responds back, well, of course she's a role model. Do you know her work ethic? And I said, well, I don't really know her work ethic. Guys, I shouldn't have said this, okay, but it's kind of funny in hindsight at least. I don't know her work ethic, but Joseph Stalin had a good work ethic, and he's clearly not a role model. She was not happy. Not happy. There was a clear, defining moment in the night where everyone was happy, and then people were not so happy for the rest of the night because she wasn't happy. But isn't it funny? And I'm not trying to just pick on the Swifties. How we can take something we like about a person and say that, oh, because we like this so much, everything else about this person must also be good. It's called the halo effect. The halo effect. Think of like a halo over a picture of a saint in the Catholic Church or an angel that signifies holiness. And the halo effect is when we do exactly that. Because we've been so inspired by someone, so motivated by something they have done for us, that we are blind and we overlook the reality of this person's sin and shortcomings. And I'm not trying to say listen or don't listen to Taylor Swift or any of these artists. I'm trying to say we need to have our eyes open and honest about what they represent and how they live. The saying of eat the meat and spit out the bones, right? Where you're chewing the meat, you're not swallowing the bones, you're spitting them out. And I'm always assuming that there's bones because I don't want to choke on something. And whenever we're dealing with inspiration, someone who has inspired us, whether it be Christian or not Christian, we must always be on the lookout for bones and not be blind. Because if we are blind to their shortcomings, then maybe this person has become an idol. Letter D in your notes under number 1. Devastated when they let us down. Devastated when they let us down. And it certainly hurts when someone who we looked up to lets us down. But every single year, some Christian leader's sinful life is uncovered, and every year we hear about people who were led away from Jesus because of that discovery. And we shouldn't normalize when a spiritual leader falls into sin. I'm not trying to make that be like, oh, it's normal, get over it. It's a big deal, and it does hurt. But if your faith is shook so deeply because of the failure of someone else, then perhaps your faith was built on the wrong person. Perhaps you had taken someone who has done something good for you and made them an idol. I always think it's interesting. I don't know if this is true or not. It's something my dad used to say with a twinkle in his eye. He used to say that Jewish parents would put a kid up on a wall or a roof and say, jump, I'll catch you. And they wouldn't catch them. They'd let them fall and hit the ground. And that was to teach them to never trust in people, but only in God. And my dad would usually remind us of this when we were in a situation that involved trusting him. And I think he had a little too much fun with that. But if you are devastated, if your faith is shaken by someone who you looked up to failing you, and maybe they have become an idol. But here's the thing, in your notes, number 2, we actually still need heroes. We need to follow and be heroes for people because Paul says, 1 Corinthians 11:1, he says, follow my example, or in other translations, imitate me as I imitate Christ. He is telling people, hey, look at the way in which I am following Christ, and you want to do that as well. One of the things I enjoy about being a youth pastor is getting to know some of the kids first, getting to pick up on some of their mannerisms and different vocabulary they use, just how they say things or expressions or jokes, and then meeting the parents, because without fail, I'll be talking with the parent and I'll get a little bit of a smile and be like, aha, I heard your kid use that exact same wording. I heard your kid make that exact same look, or I saw your kid make that exact same look, because your kids pick up your expressions and you have an influence on them. And it's not just people who are parents. We all carry an influence over people that we often don't even realize. And there is a calling on us to be examples, to be an influence, to lead people to Jesus. So we still need heroes. We need heroes who, 2A, in your notes, heroes who model the character of Jesus and not just charisma. No one likes listening to a boring speaker. Right? We don't want a boring speaker on stage. Hopefully I'm not too boring. We want someone who's going to be interesting and easier to listen to. And because of that, in the church, I think so many times it's just easy to look at someone's charisma and overlook their character. But I think sometimes even as parents and as teachers and as people who are trying to teach in a community group, we can be focused on thinking about what's the flashy thing, what's the cool thing, what's the charismatic thing that's going to get people interested, and overlook the importance that character should always come first. I'm actually going to skip letter B. I'm going to come right back to it. I want to do letter C first. That's going to bug you, some of you guys at least, I'm sorry. But I'm going to do letter C first. 2C, we need heroes who are honest about their shortcomings and need for Jesus. We don't need leaders, and we don't need to be people who are putting up a facade to pretend as if somehow we have arrived spiritually. If you think that of me, just ask Deb or Megan Vandervluck about receipts that never made their way to the office. Many times. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying. But we need to be honest about our shortcomings. And now, letter B. There you go. You can fill it in. I know this is bugging some of you. We need heroes who inspire us to put our faith in God, never themselves. Do you know that our hero worship can be found in how we tell the stories of the Bible? For example, we have the story of David, and we just sang a song about the same God of David and the same God of Abraham and the same God of all these heroes of faith. But have you ever noticed how sometimes we tell these Bible stories, and we'll talk about David and tell everyone, oh, you need to be brave like David, and you need to follow David's example, and we tend to overlook that he's a murderer, that he kills, and that he doesn't punish his rebellious son, which leads to all kinds of problems. And one time he lines people up and he's just pointing to people like, hey, kill this one, kill that one. He is a murderer. He has blood on his hands. We say Solomon. Now, obviously, everyone knows about the wives, but be wise like Solomon. Of course, Solomon also puts the nation into debt building the palace. He puts heavy taxations on the people, and as soon as his rule is done, pretty much the kingdom is split. Because he wasn't a perfect king. He was deeply flawed. We say, be a good guy like Noah, the only guy in all the world that God thought was worth saving. Of course, as soon as he lands the boat, he throws a big party, gets drunk, and funky stuff happens. We never tell that part of the story. We never tell that part of the story. Because each hero in the Bible is deeply flawed. We look at the heroes of faith and we look at their lives and it's like, man, should Samson? Why is Samson in the hall of faith? What good thing did Samson do? And we overlook the fact that these heroes are heroes because they point not to themselves, but to the true hero. They are heroes because they point to the one who would become that would be perfect in every way that they were imperfect. Because we should seek to be people who are not pointing others to ourselves, to not be the destination as, hey, come where I'm at and you will have arrived spiritually, but to be signposts that point people to the true hero who is Jesus. And in John 9, we read about two kinds of blind people, don't we? We read about a physically blind man, but who sees spiritually, and a spiritually blind Pharisees. Two kinds of blind people in this passage. Because the Pharisees were blind to their idolatry of Moses and to seeing the true nature of Jesus. So in your notes under 3A, remember, he, Jesus, seeks us out when we have nothing to offer. Going back in John chapter 9, after the blind man has been thrown out and he's wandering around, check this out in verse 35 of John chapter 9. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? All these famous people and inspirational people, they are rich in their castles, locked behind guards. They'll come and sign some stuff for some of their fans to keep their publicity up. But here we have Jesus going out and seeking someone who has nothing to offer. Jesus has sought you out, not because he needs your vote, not because he needs your money or your time. Jesus doesn't need you to like his post and watch his video and listen to his song. Jesus has sought you out, and he needs nothing from you. He has sought you out only because that is who he is, because he is good, because he is the real hero. Letter B. Hang on his words over anyone else's. Back in John 9, Jesus asks the man, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the formerly blind man responds, "Who is he, sir?" The man asks, "Tell me so that I may believe in him." The man doesn't say, I might believe if my favorite artist says it's cool. I might believe as long as it's legal. I might believe as long as my family is okay with it, I'll believe Jesus. I'll believe, but let me go first and watch a YouTube video to see if it's okay. No, he believes because he is hanging on the words of Jesus, because he recognizes Jesus as his ultimate source of influence. And so he says, "Tell me so that I may believe." Because in his mind, Jesus has the final say on what he does. So I'm asking you, are the words of Jesus influencing you in this way in your life? Letter C. Worship Jesus, and your worship for others will be displaced. Going back to John chapter 9, verse 37, Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Because you may find inspiration from people. You may find examples that you should follow. But you will never be in danger of worshiping these people if you are worshiping Jesus to your fullest. And the last blank on point number D, give Jesus leeway to challenge you. Returning for one more time to John chapter 9, Jesus said, "For judgment I've come into this world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What, are we blind too?" And in verse 41, Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin, but now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." Jesus challenges them, and they immediately question it. You're saying we're blind too? They were willing to follow the extreme practices that they came up with about how to honor the Sabbath, to not pull a hair from their head on the Sabbath, not clip their nails, to not use too many nails in your sandals because that would be extra work for the Sabbath. They're willing to do extreme things that were not even in the Bible to honor Sabbath and honor their hero Moses, but they were not willing to give Jesus leeway to challenge them. Jesus, who the entire law and prophets had pointed to all along. So I'm asking us today, do we make room for Jesus to challenge us? Do we open God's word and think, "Lord, I know there is something in my life that needs to improve so I can show Jesus better. What is it, God? Show me." Do we say, "Jesus, no matter how much it hurts, help me become more like you. Do what it takes, God"? Do we care more about looking like Jesus than any other person in our life, than any other hero in our life? Is the biggest compliment you could ever receive is for someone to say, "Wow, you demonstrated Jesus today." Is our biggest goal in life is to get at the end of our life and hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant," because if it isn't, then maybe Jesus has been displaced by an idol in your life. Because in this passage, there are two kinds of people. The person who sees Jesus as the true hero and lives it, and the person who is blind to the hero Jesus is and follows someone else instead. Which are you? Let's pray. God, I come before you, asking for each of us here that we look to Jesus as the true hero of our life and no one else. I pray that we each come to see the kind of impact we can have when we model Jesus, that we can ultimately point people to Jesus and never ourselves, that we can be giant signposts that light the way to following you, and being more and more like Jesus, who seeks us out when we have nothing to offer, who died for us when we had nothing to give, and gave us everything when we had nothing to give in return. And so I pray, God, that we honor Jesus in all we do this week, that we go into community groups with our hearts open to learn. And this I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.